Okay, hey guys, welcome back to another episode with Mark and Christine on the Great UNLearning Project podcast. Happy day to you.
Happy day to you. We are recording this from home today because we are in the midst of the self-quarantine season of the coronavirus. So we are keeping business as usual. Things are just a little bit different. We're pivoting today. So we're doing this from home. So if you guys are watching this in the background, we're keeping it raw and real.
Isn't it interesting?
Yeah, and how appropriate our podcast topic for today.
I know, I'm super excited about this one.
Yeah. So
super excited about this
change happening. And it's so funny because we always talk about on this podcast, we always talk about like when the external world throws you for a loop, what do you do? And usually we're talking about things like job situation shifting, or our partner irritating us, or trying to make a decision about a relationship that may or may not be working anymore. So, or
all the other things that trigger you.
Yeah.
Not global pandemic.
Right.
Nobody sees this. Nobody saw that one coming.
So now it's like, okay, all the stuff you've been talking about and preparing for just like blew up bigger.
Exactly.
It just got bigger. It's the same stuff, but now we get the chance to really do the work of putting all that practice that we were doing into play. So before it was practice rounds, now it's game time.
It's game time for real. And
game time.
What's interesting is I'm observing all of this. And in the last episode, it was called Become the Observer, one of the last episodes in this 10-part series on the top 10 tips for unlearning, which this is a continuation of. Last one we talked about becoming the observer and just looking around at the world around us and seeing what's happening and trying to come at it from an objective place, not a place of being triggered, right? And just be willing to see even just your reaction, almost like I'm looking at it in a fishbowl. And, I've had my fair share of reactions over the last few days and the last week as this has been happening. So, as we record this, I'm in Canada at Christine's house. They're closing the borders. There's not a lot of real intel detail. Like the only reason like we know anything is because we know somebody who knows somebody who works border patrol, and we were able to find out like, can I leave the country to go home to my kids, right? And so I certainly was a little triggered about that this morning. I couldn't find my passport, like we left it in the glove box of the car, and so we have these things that are coming up as a result of what's going on. And so I think this week's topic is super timely as we dive into the unlearning tip of practicing curiosity.
Yeah, and I just want to tag on to that because you said something there about like looking at things through a fishbowl, but kind of circling back to, before when we were doing all this work or we've been having these conversations, whatever we've been doing, whatever's inside of us just is amplified, right? Whatever is already inside, if we were already anxious, like right now we're going to find that we feel that so much more. It's like a magnifying glass gets put on when these external circumstances come. So if we were already in the practice of cultivating joy, cultivating faith, cultivating, detachment, which I want to, just tap back into that for a second, it's going to augment. It's easier to get there. So it's never too late to start. And just know that right now, if you feel like things are really extra big, because there is a lot of big uncertainty going on, whatever thing you're feeling that is like so magnified, just again, be the observer. And it's not like you are the thing, you're not the feeling, but really just watching it to go, oh, isn't that interesting? Like I'm experiencing anxiousness right now. You're having the experience, but you're not the thing. And I know for myself, I've done a lot of work this year. We've talked about this. Yesterday we were on in the trails, social distancing, but having this conversation with a couple of people that we know about just how when we're attached to things, then it's so much more painful. So right now, last time we talked about becoming the observer instead of being attached to it, like suction cup to it, right? Like, because now I'm taking on the energy of the thing to really just detach, like take those energetic suction cups off of you, be like, I'm not you, you're not me. We're just in this together, having this experience together. And so by becoming an observer and watching it and watching myself, now I can start to move it around. I can start to play with it. I actually go, okay, I own this thing. It doesn't own me. So if we own something, then that means we can choose what we want to do with it, because now we own it. It's not us.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I don't know if that's,
well, it's absolutely true, right? And I love that last line, right? Because we own it, right? It doesn't have to be us, right? It doesn't have to trigger me. I can observe it and see it for what it is. I can even be curious about it, right? And I can look at it in a different way. So today we're going to dive into this topic of practicing curiosity. Exploration kickstarts new potentials. This is one thing I've been asking a lot of my clients that I hope will sort of guide our conversation today. And I'm interested in your thoughts, Christine, because what I've been talking to my clients about not only is like, how do we lead with certainty in uncertain times and all that stuff, but also start to look at what does this look like for you when we're on the other side of it, right? So here's the thing that I know is, what I don't know is how long is this going to last? None of us could predict that. We hear anything from, school's out for 6 to 8 weeks to down to 3 weeks. To this could take 18 months, right? So there's all this like ambiguity and we don't know, right? So I'm just observing that as like, okay, this is a thing I have no control over. So I'm observing that, I'm looking at that through the fishbowl lens, saying, okay, that's a thing I can't fix. What I do know is at some point, someday, based on history, always proving that there's always a way or a time when we get to the other side of the crisis, there's going to be another side. So what I'm asking myself, when I'm asking my clients to consider and get clear on, or at least try to get clear on, is, so what does life look like for you when you're on the other side of this? And that's one way that we can start to get curious, is just say, okay, so
assuming this has already blown over,
yeah,
and we're not in this situation anymore, then what? So instead of being like, what if, and to your point, I think we had a happy hour yesterday, a virtual happy hour, and we were talking about this as well. But like, what does it look like? And so a couple things that we talked about earlier in the day with some of our coaching calls when we were on a call, and then it kind of went into the happy hour, was what if we get to play right now? What if we get to explore? Because what questions we ask ourselves is so key. Ask a great question, you'll get a great response. Your brain wants to answer a question. If you ask yourself a poor question from the old program, like, why is this happening? Oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? Like, and you're asking yourself questions that pull you down into the vortex. Ask a shitty question, you're going to get a shitty answer. And that shitty answer is going to pull you down the vortex even more. So now more than ever, I'm just playing with like, what cool questions can I ask myself right now that allow me to feel expansive, that allow me to play, to explore, to innovate? So a couple things we said yesterday was like, to your point of what does it look like on the other side, is also like, if I was to like start over from scratch, and this was like a brave new world, right? Like if I was to, and I have to do this in my business, and Mark and I have been both doing this in our businesses, because we're all, as small business owners, large businesses, entrepreneurs, everyone right now is having to pivot. So a really cool question we were playing with yesterday with one of our masterminds was, if I was to start it all over again, and it could just be like totally the way I dreamed about, right? Like moving forward in this world, what would I create? Because we get so stuck into the way things used to be, and we're attached to it. And one of my clients said, we had talked about the rules, like the bullshit rules, right? And we have all these rules of like what it should look like business should look a certain way, think back to like when everybody was working in an office, like working from home was not normal. And yet now more and more people are working from home. But there was a time where that was like, no, that was a rule. Like you don't work from home. And yet now in the new world, there is, right? There was a time where we had to do face-to-face interactions, and now more people are going online. So what are the bullshit rules that don't apply anymore maybe, right? So what, I love that question.
Interesting little just total sidebar observation about this. I'm thinking back historically, right? We've only been working away from home for about 100 years. Right? As a people, right? Because we were very, 100 years ago, 75% of at least, America, and Canada, North America would have been living on the farm, right? Living in rural areas, working, right? So we created this mass hysteria where everybody, not, well, it's not hysteria, but just this movement to the city, this movement to towns, this movement to working in office buildings and factories and all this stuff, right, with the Industrial Revolution and so on and so forth. And now what you have is like this, I think this could be the trigger point, the moment where we realize like, shit, we were built to work from home to begin with.
Built to work
right?
from home
Like,
to begin with. And
anyway,
yeah.
that's how we've evolved as, homebodies, creatures that lived in tribes and within communities, small communities. And so it's just kind of interesting, but it does bring up an interesting point, because I think what has caused, what potentially causes a lot of stress for people, I'm just going to take this COVID-19 instance as the example, is people right now are just focusing on how to get by day to day. Right? Like, where's my next roll of toilet paper coming from? Right? Where's my next meal coming from? And not that.
And that's legit. Like,
that's
the survival part of our brain that is totally kicking in. So that's like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years of evolutionary, like, programming. Right?
Exactly. In full disclaimer, I'm not trying to be non-compassionate or non-empathetic or inconsiderate of anybody's situation, right? Because if you got a health situation or a financial situation, you very well may be just looking for the next, how do we get through the next day, the next week, the next month. Totally get it from a cash flow perspective. Being in a small business, that's our situation as well. So there's a certain level of survival mode that serves us. Yet, like when our focus becomes only on the way what's going on around me now, and the panic and the influence that's going on around me now, it eliminates our ability to practice curiosity, right? So the learned pathway, right, is everybody starts to go with the current. What we're asking you to do as unlearners in this community is to just crawl out of the current for a bit, get up on the shore, and take a look around and see what the fuck is everybody else doing, and how do I do something different?
Yeah, we do not want to be swimming in that current with everyone else, like running around. I have this image that came up for me a couple weeks ago when I was in a deep state of meditation in our trip down in Colombia. And it felt, I was like in this bubble of light and like protection. And I just kept hearing this voice, like, be calm, be still, stay grounded, focus on building your energy, focus on building your power, and you will know when it's time to act. You will know when it's time to go out. You will feel this crazy pull, this intuitive nudge that I will guide you on, and then it'll be time to act. And as I was in this meditation, I was visualizing, and I could see all these people outside of my bubble, let's call it, running around, bumping into each other. And there was like all this frantic activity, people very, very busy, right? I'm busy, I can't stop. And here's another thing, like, when we freak out, like when people are unsure, like they don't know what to do with themselves, like the way that we are programmed is like, we just want to feel productive. So we just start doing, we have this energy that needs to come out. So we do one of two things. Either we collapse on the couch and do nothing and fall into that sort of despair hope thing. Sometimes people also go hyper, to do, like they got to keep busy to keep their minds occupied, which is okay. And yet we can fall into that mindless pattern of just being like mindlessly throwing our energy everywhere, doing stuff that isn't actually expanding us. It's actually constricting us, and it's robbing our energy. So we're actually depleting ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I really beg, this is just purely like what I'm working on myself. Even like right before we jumped on this podcast, I was meditating about this very thing and praying about it, is that I have just this overwhelming sense of peace and stay grounded and build my energy. And I'm ruthless about those practices now, so that when I feel the intuitive nudge and I know I have a ping, whether it's a new business thing, like a new business idea or whatever, like whatever it is, a Facebook Live I need to do or something I need to create, that I move forward with intention, with focused energy, and I get in and I get out, and I'm not just spewing energy everywhere. But I think like that goes back to, the question of like, what else is possible, right? Like what else is possible? So really just kind of like, for me, I want to kind of keep bringing it back to like, what questions are we asking ourselves? Because if you think about curiosity, like when we were kids, And we go play in the backyard. It's like, hey, Mark, let's build a fort. Let's build a fort. And you're like, yeah, well, what about this? And what if we had this thing? And then we're like, well, what if we're kings and queens? And it just keeps like, kids are always like, what else can we do? What else, right? There's always play and curiosity and expansion.
And that's our natural state. Like that is the natural state of the human spirit. We come in that way. What happens is then we learn, right? We learn by watching adults that when we're not prompted to do something else, or when creativity dies down, that now we're bored, right? Because we see adults being bored or talking about being bored, right? That's not a kid thing that they figured out. Like that was a learned behavior.
That's rules. Those are bullshit rules that we were taught, like, don't do this, don't do it this way.
If you're experiencing that with your kids and you're homeschooling now because school's been canceled for the rest of the year, guess what? That's a perfect reflection of you. So we get to practice some curiosity around that. We get to become the observer of that and practice some of these unlearning things. I want to dive in, Christine. I want to see if we can come up with a list of questions that people can ask when you find yourself coming into maybe some of these triggers or some of these things that are coming up, and some common stuff, right? So if you've downloaded our PDF on the top 10 tips for unlearning, this is the guide.
Now's the time. We are unlearning at a rapid pace. Exactly. When things get like this, you don't have a choice. We're forced to unlearn. So the beautiful thing is, like, we're now given this awesome opportunity from God, from the universe, to like reprogram fast. So anything that no longer serves us, anything that no longer applies, anything that keeps us constricted and tight gets to go away and get upgraded. Otherwise, we're going to suffer. We are going to suffer. And there's still some suffering happening sometimes. There's moments. I mean, I had a moment yesterday. I was like, well, but it's like, can I catch myself faster? Can I reprogram? So I love it. So let's just dive in. We've already talked about it.
Yeah, we're going to brainstorm a few. So we'll review those that we've talked about. But certain things that come up, right? So let's get away from this COVID-19 thing. Let's get away from the global pandemic crisis and just talk about some other like day-to-day things. So if you're looking, if you were to go back and look at the guide, one of the things we talk about is, we hear people say this all the time. You've said it, right? I'm terrible at remembering names, right? I hear this all the time.
Or I'm so lazy, or I'm so stupid,
things
or I'm
like
not
this,
athletic,
right? So that's the program, right? That's a program that's been learned. Somewhere along the way, you saw a grandma or a mom or a coworker or somebody who said, I'm terrible at remembering names, right? And now you've got this genetic lineage of people who are terrible at remembering names, even though it's just a rule. It's a rule that you made up. It's a thought. It's a learned behavior. So what would be a better question in that particular case?
Yeah. And as you're talking about that, I also said, like, the question also is like, what bullshit rules are still playing right now that I know do not apply anymore, because they're making me feel tight and tense and constricted. So, to your point, is like, what is it that I'm telling myself here that is just, I know is a lie? Because your heart, your soul knows that that's not true. That's why you feel like torn about it, because you say these things and they're so out of alignment with our natural state that you constantly feel torn. You feel like you're kind of like this double personality. So
in a case like this, I mean, the most bulletproof question that I love actually it stems from a great book, which also is based on 4 questions, called The Work. The work of the book, the theme of the book, I guess, as it comes out, she calls it The Work, but it's called Loving What Is by Byron Katie. I think it's one of the greatest unlearning books that you could get, download, read, etc. It's so good. The audiobook is great because she's actually in it doing live interventions with people, talking through interventions that she's done to help people break through their rules. But one of the opening question, anytime somebody has a thought, right? Let's just say I'm terrible at remembering names. So your question to break through this, to practice curiosity, is, well, is that true?
Yeah. And as you're talking about rules, like, by the way, we call them rules. Some people call them limiting beliefs. Some people call them like programs. It's all the same. Like, it is a program that's running, and they're usually like the question that you always, like, whenever you think you are, you're faced with a decision or a circumstance, it's kind of like that thing that pops in your mind that is resistance. It's like a speed bump. So we're calling it rules, limiting beliefs, programming, whatever it is. When you hear it, is that really true?
You bet. Is it? I think that's your go-to question. That's question number 1 that you could ask yourself. And then the follow-up question to that, because sometimes your bullshit mind that believes in the bullshit rules will try to bring you back to buying into bullshit. So if you're getting a yes, you're getting resistance in the mind, the follow-up question is that really true?
Yeah.
Is it really true that you're not good at remembering names? Or is it possible that you just haven't trained your brain yet to know, to be good at remembering everybody's name? Right.
I remember once we were at one of my retreats, and I was actually doing this. We were kind of like deprogramming one of the women that was there. And one of the things that kept coming up for her was like, I know I'm beautiful on the inside, but I'm just ugly. Like my physical appearance is ugly. So I'm ugly. And like, even though she would do all this work on it internally, she's like, yeah, I know I'm really beautiful, but like on the outside, I'm ugly. Right. And so working through that. And so what happens, just to that point, is when we ask ourselves, is that true? And we all watch this. Like we had a group, like this is a live kind of intervention that we were watching her physiology as she was going through this process. So this is really interesting, is that as you ask her that, what you said is like your brain will try to, you know, I would say like ask the question 3 times, right? Because the first time your brain's going to be like, bah, 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 bah. And so how you know is that you're all up in your head is that you are trying to justify it, you're trying to reason it, you're trying to explain it. Your brain is actually trying to make a case, like, yeah, see, it's true because of this and this, and you will feel your physiology in your head, it'll just be very busy and constricted, and so you know you're up in your head. So I love to ask this question like 3 times, because I kind of feel like it goes from head. The second time we ask it, we start to dissolve it and break it apart, and you kind of get into the heart a bit more. You might still be up in your head if you've trained yourself to do that a long time. Yeah. But the heart starts to go, well, that's not really true. You know, the truth starts to kind of creep in. Yeah. And so for me, like asking it a 3rd time is like, what does my soul know the truth is? Yeah. You know, that's not Byron's work, but that's what.
And Christine, talk a little bit about the physiology, right? Because you can actually test this with your body. Like, are you lying to yourself when you answer these questions or not? So whether we're asking, is it true? Or another one I love in this arena that we ask is, who do I get to be? When, right? Who do I get to be when I'm great at remembering names? Who do I get to be when I know that I'm beautiful? Who do I get to be when I know that I'm a badass, right? Or who do I be when, you know, in those states? And you start to answer these. And what happens in the brain is you have a story that you bought into over time that's become the program, the base operating system program that you're operating from. And so that has kept you safe and alive to this point. And that's the brain's basic functionality, is just to keep this body safe and alive. So when you start to challenge it with new questions, it's going to put up some resistance,
it's
right?
Just like having a discussion with someone else, right? Mark told me I was stubborn this morning, by the way. He says I'm difficult to disagree with, which, y'all, if you know me, that's probably true. I'm stubborn. I push back, but I say, you know, it's actually, that was a perfect example of it. Because like this morning, he's like, yeah, you're a little bit hard to disagree with. And then I was like, I know I'm pig-headed and stubborn sometimes. I can be, isn't it interesting? But here's the thing, is like, even though I have that initial resistance, that pushback, that's the old program, right? My old program is like, they clearly don't believe in me, or they're not supporting me. Otherwise they wouldn't be disagreeing with me. Just so you're clear, like I have this program runs too, right? And it runs harder when I'm tired, when I'm depleted, when I haven't eaten, when there's like heightened stuff going on, like right now, making decisions like, do we close the business? Do we shut it down? And so that resistance comes up. And yet once I pull away from it and I just go back, meditate, become the observer, get curious about it, like 99% of the time I come back and I'm like, oh, right. You know, and I see it from a totally different perspective, because I'm asking myself, like, is that really true? Is that, yeah.
So here's, I'm going to share what I coach my clients to do. And then I want Christine to talk about how she coaches her clients to like pay attention to the physiology, like when it pulls you forward. You know, so if I'm asking somebody, you know, who do you get to be, or I'm having them ask themselves, who do I get to be, or who do I be when? Right? Or what would it look like when? So when the inner subconscious is so very bought into the story that you've been living, sometimes when you ask it questions like, who do I get to be, or who would I be, or what would it look like? It's going to say, I don't know. Right? You're going to hear, and literally this is probably happening for some of you right now. As you're asking yourself some of these questions, it's going to say, I don't know. So here's what that is. Inside you, you have your inner child. 95% of your neurological hardwiring was baked into your subconscious by the time that you were 9 years old. And we know this to be true. We know this as a fact. 95% of your subconscious wiring was baked by the time that you were 9, maybe 10 if you're a slow learner like me. And so
maybe 7 if you're fast.
and there's some evidence that like a good chunk of it's done by 4 or 5. By the time you're 5, your brain is 95% the size that it's going to be the rest of your life. Right? So I don't know, that's where those little bobblehead kids come from. My kids are all that way. They have big heads, little bodies. So what happens though, so much of that neurological programming happens at a very, very young age. And therefore you still have that inner child very much locked into your subconscious. You still make decisions today with your adult mind and logic and reasoning, but that inner child is still there. And they have been keeping you safe and alive to this point with the base operating system that you created in the early part of your life based on the environment and who you were and what kind of decisions you made and the decisions and the environment of those around you, all of the things, right? And so what happens is sometimes when I'm going to now challenge and potentially threaten the old belief system in order to unlearn, and I'm going to hear, I don't know. Who do I be when? I don't know. Right? What would it look like? I don't know. And what that is that inner child is very comfortable and okay with who you've been to this point. And so they're putting up a smoke screen. They're putting up a little bit of a mental block, a roadblock, if you will, to keep you continuing to be safe and alive. That is the basic job of the operating system. And so in this new higher conscious and in this practice of unlearning, I get to pay attention. This is what I coach my people to do is even as they're saying, I don't know, there's a thought, right? There's an initial thought that bubbles up, a picture, maybe a thought bubble, something that's happening in your brain. I promise you, when you ask it questions for real, is going to give you an initial response. What you're going to start to do is you're going to start to judge that thought. You're going to judge it. You're going to start to make it wrong. You're like, no, that's not it. That's not. No, I want you to go with that very first thought when you ask it these questions. Is it true? Is it really true? Who would I get to be if it was different? What would it look like if life was different, right? These are all great unlearning questions that you can use during this process. Notice, pay attention to, be present for yourself, be centered in the moment, and then listen to that first thing that pops up and then just roll with that, right? Roll with that and say, oh, isn't that interesting? Tell me more about that. Help me understand that. What would it look like if that were true? And just be curious about it, right? It doesn't have to be right or wrong. I'm just looking at it objectively and say, oh, well, that's interesting.
I think that's so key that giving ourselves permission to just feel, think, have these things come up. So sorry, I didn't mean to interject,
Okay.
but I think it's important that people know because we edit ourselves, right? The brain is really fast to self-edit. And so if it feels like unnatural, it's not our natural state, that first thing, you'll have the ping, like you'll have it. Some of us haven't trained ourselves to listen to it, like that thing that's like your soul is sleeping going, yeah, that's possible for me. But then your brain kicks in, it's like, no, it's not. So don't even think that. Don't even write that down. Let's write something more realistic. Let's say something more realistic. So one of the things I really encourage, and I mean, I'm constantly doing this, it's like, I will not self-edit. I will not self-edit. And in fact, when I coach my clients on this, I'm like, go fast. Like we actually set a timer sometimes and I'm like, go fast, like pour whatever's coming through you, just allow yourself to speak it, to write it out, to say it out loud. And anything is game because all we're doing is like, we're just moving this information and allowing it to come to the surface. If we don't allow ourselves to have the experience with the information and the energy, then we can't, see the potential or the possibility of it. So speak fast, think, like allow yourself, give yourself permission to acknowledge and whatever comes up. It doesn't mean you have to do anything with it, right? Like this is the thing, people are afraid, and we know this, like even, old school goal setting, like people are afraid to set certain goals if they're not realistic, right? We're taught like they have to be realistic and they need to be timely. And I hate SMART goals, but that's a different conversation. But that whole thing is like, oh, don't write it down if it's not realistic. Let's pick something a little bit. And that's where we limit ourselves. So give yourself permission to say, think, whatever, knowing that I don't have to actually do anything. Like just because I put it out there doesn't mean I have to do it. All we want to do is allow it to come up. and to come out. Because once we look at it and your brain sees that it's a possibility or potential, trust me, your subconscious has been exposed to it.
Absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about like how you have people like test with their body? So like when you, so now let's say I've practiced curiosity, I'm getting a thought, maybe I'm getting an answer to my questions, right? So who would I be?
So let's do it. So I'm going to jump into that, but I also want to just close the loop because I felt like going back to those two questions.
I've been trying to pin her down to get the, like, bring this out for like 10 minutes. I'm going to get there.
He's going to get there, but I want to make sure that I close the loop because
Yeah.
you talked about asking the question, when this belief comes up,
Yep.
Is it true? Right? Asking yourself the first time. And I want to remind you, like, is this really true? The brain your brain is going to, your heart speaks first, but many people haven't trained themselves to listen to their soul. So you're going to hear the voice of the chatter of the brain. Know that's what it is. Know that that's your protective programming. Ask again. Is it absolutely true? Is this my truth? Is this my soul's truth? Ask again. The next thing is like, okay, your heart, you'll start to feel a shift in your physiology that maybe your brain's like, I don't know, your heart's starting to be a little bit louder. Then I ask again a third time, what is my soul's truth? What does my soul know that the truth is? Or what does God know the truth is? Or whatever resonates for you, but get out of your head and then listen to the third ping. Because for me, it kind of goes like head, heart, soul, or spirit. Like now we're really talking, like we're accessing that 5D, right? And that's where the truth lies. So allow yourself to be free and open up. And I just keep asking and asking until I don't feel that resistance in my body. So we'll talk about that. So I just wanted to circle back on that.
That's good. That's a very good
Yeah.
point.
And the second thing I wanted to circle back on was when you said, who do I get to be when this happens? Because you asked me, how do I coach my clients on that too? It's like, this is how I coach myself. By the way, I always like believe like whatever Mark and I teach or talk about, like this is like our daily practice. Like we are always doing this work. Yeah. We're talking about it. We're sharing about it. And that question of who do I get to be when is powerful. For me, I still felt like it was a little bit of distance for me. Like I had a hard time grasping on it. So we were actually at an event last week where the guy who was presenting also asked us that question. And I actually, you know, I'm not poo-pooing it, but like for me, I wrote down like, assuming that's already happened, who am I? So assuming I've already pivoted my business and I found new ways to create income. Assuming I already have the body that's lean and strong, assuming I already have the relationship, that deep, intimate connection, who am I being right now? And what that does for me is it allows me to pull it into the present moment and it eliminates the gap or the distance between me and that thing, right? So that's really been very, very beneficial for me because I got to make it as real as possible for myself right now. So taking that future vision, pulling it into the present moment, like assuming that's already done. Who's that woman that made it happen? Like even talking about it as if it's like in the past, not even in the future, but like that's already done, you know? And then that just allows me to be like, yeah, of course, that's what I would do. I would be getting up and getting moving. I would get up and send him a text saying like, hey babes, you're a rock star. You're so hot. Like, I love the way you step up and I do this, by the way.
I love when she does that.
I do, but I'm thinking like that is how like I've programmed my brain to think is like assuming our relationship is already amazing. And he feels appreciated and we have this intimate connection. Like, what is it that I do regularly? Who am I? And it's like, I'm someone who respects him. I'm someone who values you, you know? Yeah. And so like, it's being in the already having, already doing. So
I love this.
Sorry, I pivoted a bit. I'm going to get to the body stuff in a second.
But I love this concept of, you know, really leaning into, so you know, sometimes it's a really easy exercise to just sit down and sort of dream a little bit or be imaginative about what it could look like with a business or life or your partnership or, you know, your spouse or whatever, you know, like, I don't know, maybe you're dating, right? And you're just looking for that, you know, perfect person to pop in your life. So I can actually start to dream a little bit and just say, okay, well, who, you know, what would they do? What would they be like? This is something that you did before we met, right?
This is exactly what I did. I made a list of all the things.
Yeah. And then, you know, then the question becomes, well, then who do I be, right? Who do I be to attract that person into my life? Who do I be to attract that customer into my life? Who do I be to be able to do this for a living, whatever this is for you. So I love that.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Like when I got clear and I decided, like, dude, I was done with these shitty relationships. I was done feeling like I had, was struggling to find intimacy. I was struggling to find like this depth of connection. I was like, I felt unsupported most of the time in relationship. But by the way, that's a lot of our subconscious program, right? I said earlier in this call, like when I get triggered, when I push back, it's because I feel unsupported. So isn't it interesting that I kept attracting relationships in the past where I felt unsupported? And so when I was like, that's it, I'm calling in my soulmate, I didn't just make a laundry list of like, he's this, he's this, he's this, he's this. I made a very clear list. I started with a list that then I gave life to. I breathed life into it. And this is what I walk my clients through, is how do we make it real right now? But it was, how does it feel to be in this amazing relationship? Like, who is this person that I'm already with? Like when I'm speaking to him, when we're working through problems, like how do we handle these things? And then it was like getting really real and looking at that and going, okay, assuming I already have that relationship, who's the woman I am that has attracted this man into my life? And I was like, oh my God, this is brutal, because I had the wake up moment where I was like, well, I say we have this beautiful, respectful relationship, and I say we have this beautiful, supportive relationship, but I haven't been truly respectful. I haven't been truly supportive. I've been waiting for them to fuck up, or I've been waiting for them to let me down, or I've been waiting for them to not support me, right? And so I was in the energy of the opposite of what I wanted, waiting when this guy was going to show up and be perfect, then I would get to be this woman. And it's like, it doesn't work that way. You get to be it now, girlfriend. So, and once I shifted, then things happened really fast, right? So there's a whole bunch more that happened around that. But let's go back to really testing this in our bodies. So,
okay, so now you've met the person. Let's just say in this particular case, it was
man of
me.
my dreams, my twin flame.
And then he's like, hey, 3 weeks after you meet, I've got this trip to Colombia, just interested if you want to go with. And so then how do you determine whether this is
a perfect example? So here I am. And again, I believe God, the universe, like moves in unexpected, unplanned ways. We can have the best strategies and the best laid plans. And right now is the perfect time. Last week, I bet a lot of you listening had plans that this week have been blown out of the water. So I'm not into making a lot of long-term plans. I'm into really like doing this work day by day and trusting the intuitive guidance, setting a plan in motion for right now, knowing that it can pivot at any moment, and I get to surrender to the process. And then as I do so, like things start to open up. And that's exactly what happened here, is that, once I got really clear of what I was wanting in my life. And by the way, I was doing it from a desire of expansion, not a desire of like, I want this because I don't have it. And I was focused on what I didn't have, which was the past. I shifted, and the desire now is, I'm like, yes, look at what can be possible. Look at what I could create. So it was it was a pull desire versus rooted in lack, right? Be very careful with that. I did a video on that on my YouTube channel. You guys can listen to that. But really important that as we're stating, I want this guy, I want this relationship, I want this job, I want this business, that our energy isn't in one of like, well, I want it because I don't have it, right? I want it because I know it's going to amplify my life. It's going to be beautiful. And I'm in that energy. So once I get in and I'm like, yes, I get to be this woman. I actually met Mark within literally like a month. We, again, unplanned, unexpected. We were at a Tony Robbins conference. You guys have heard the story. We end up being on the same team. He's sitting next to me. And I just have this like overwhelming sense of peace, and just like, I don't know what it is. I just feel really great in his presence. And then of course your brain's like, he lives in Nebraska. Hello, you live in Canada. This ain't gonna work. Like, right? And I'm like, whatever. I just felt the sense of peace, and I just allowed the brain to be still. And I was like, I'm not going to attach to any outcome. I'm just going to allow to be open. And we started communication and stuff. And then 3 weeks later, he was taking a group down to Colombia. We were just chatting via text. I was in Canada. He was in Nebraska. And I was, at that time, I had made the decision. I knew that last quote unquote block or belief or rule, I had a lot of beliefs. There was a lot of stacked, right? So we stack beliefs sometimes. So when we do belief stacking, what we do is like we say, well, they're probably going to leave. And then of course this, and then of course this, and I can't trust them. And. So I had I haven't had a sandwich of abandonment beliefs that were stacked so thick that I could do the work and I could keep questioning it, and definitely that works, or I could accelerate it. And so I knew it was time to accelerate unstacking those beliefs, unlearning them. So I said to Mark, like, I'm ready to just like let these abandonment things go. And when he said, okay, we're doing a trip down to Colombia, it's in 3 weeks, you can join us. He sends me a picture of the jungle. I'm like, ah! You know, my brain's like, what? You're crazy. You don't get on a plane. You're going to South America. Like, you're probably going to get kidnapped. You don't even know this guy. They could take you, chop you up. Like, you could end up in like some sort of drug trade, like all these things, right, that your brain does. And at that moment, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to soul check it. And so I always do this myself. And I always tell my clients, anytime I have to make a decision, you know, anytime I have to coach someone, I'm always soul checking, you know. And so soul check it, gut check it, heart check it, get out of your head, take the beat. So what I do and what I coach my clients to do is to step away from the situation, create space. So do not make a decision. So if you've trained yourself to listen to your intuition and you know how to do it, like, and it's fast and you're trained and you're open, then you're going to get better at this over time. But most of us haven't. So most of us have been listening to the second voice, which is the brain, which sounds like it's the first voice. It's just noise. So create space, get away from the situation. Maybe you need to get outside. Maybe you need to go for a hike. Maybe you need to meditate. Maybe you just need to like go lock yourself up in the room for a bit. I don't know. Move away from the situation and just come back to your breath. Like, come back to your breath. I love to put my hands on my heart and just really breathe slowly in through my nose, out through my mouth. And what I love to do is just visualize my heart, because our heart is actually our first line of life, right? Like, this is how we know that life force has entered this physical body, is our heartbeat. It's not our brain, right? So the heart is life force. The heart is the life-giving energy. The heart is where everything, like, you can survive without your brain working, but you cannot survive without your heart. So for me, it's like the heart is where my soul resides. And so I really take the time to breathe and connect to my heart and visualize that soul dancing and moving and being alive. And I honor that soul, that heart, that guidance, that divine guidance that's there, that I've muted, that maybe I haven't been paying attention to, that I've been going, shut up, shut up, shut up. The brain is really good at doing that. Just take a moment to see that and feel it and connect with your essence, whether you're a woman or a man, it doesn't matter, but like, honor, recognize, and look at that and be like, I see you. I see you. I hear you. I feel you, right? And just allow yourself a moment to let that expand. So it starts to feel, as you connect with it in your body, you'll notice you start to sit up taller. And I always tell my clients, sit up tall, stack your spine, because you need to be open to receive. If you're closed over like I am in this chair, you can't receive as much. So it's really important that you stack your spine and your heart is open, that your sternum is up and your chest is open to receive. And as I'm connected to that and I feel the expansiveness in my body, I always ask, and when we do this work with clients, we did it, you know, in our integration days, because I ask myself, I say, dear soul, dear God, show me in my body what a hell yes feels like. Show me very clearly, very vividly, what does a yes feel like in my body? And the reason why I ask what it feels like in my body is that our body is our feedback mechanism, right? So our body is always speaking to us, giving ourselves cues and clues. And so I asked myself, show me what it feels like in my body. And as we did this in Colombia, like everyone, and when I do this with clients, everyone has a different physiological response. So I'm not going to tell you what it should feel like, because I don't want to put that programming in your head. But people will feel all sorts of things. Your physiology changes. I will tell you this, it feels expansive. It feels open. It feels lighter. That can look or feel like a lot of things. You might feel taller. You might feel a pull going in. You might feel like just incredible peace washing over you. You may feel all those things. You may feel different things. but it will be expansive. It will be light. It will feel free. It will feel clear.
Yeah.
And you'll have a sense of ease. And so I ask again, soul, God, show me again. Show me so that I know in my body what it feels like when it's a yes. And I wait and I be still. And sometimes I'm still for 1 minute, 3 minutes. It doesn't matter. Just open to receive. Just detach from your brain and just allow your heart to be open to receive. And just be aware. Like, oh, isn't that interesting what my body's doing? Don't judge it. Don't try to analyze it. Don't try to figure it out. There's nothing to figure out. I ask again, you know my rule 3 times. Show me one more time. Make it so clear that I know that I know that I know that this is a hell yes for me, that I have no doubt. And so I be still. And then I ask my body, my soul, to show me, what does a no feel like in my body? And I wait. And even as I said that, I just felt my physiology change. I could feel the pressure in my gut and my chest. And actually, to me, it feels like I'm being pulled back. Not everyone has that experience. Some people feel like they're being pulled down. But the common thing I'll hear is that people feel some sort of heaviness. It's very heavy. The energy is dropping because your vibration is dropping. It's not in alignment with your wholeness, your truth, with divine consciousness. So I ask myself again, show me again, what does a no feel like a hell no feel like in my body? And then I ask again. So I ask a 3rd time. And then finally, I ask, I receive. And every time, by the way, every time I'm shown, I always appreciate it. And I say, thank you. Thank you for showing me that. I receive it. And then show me again. And when I feel the ping or feel the response, I just honor it. I recognize it. I say, thank you. Thank you for showing me. And I ask again. But I always acknowledge. Show me what a hell no feels like. Show me louder. I get really clear. I'm like, show me so that I know that I know. And by the way, I don't just do this once. Like, I do this all the time so that I get clearer and clearer and clearer on the hell no, so that in any given moment, I'm training myself to know it's a hell no right now. And finally, I ask myself, show me, alternate. What does a yes and a no feel like? I want you to be clear. Show me like alternating. And then I listen. And the body will actually start to alternate between the yes and the no. So you'll actually start to feel this like yin yang, like polarity happen in your body. It feels like you're being torn. So again, people feel different things, but that is an exercise. Then I ask myself the question, is this the right decision for me? I ask a question and frame it as a yes or no, so that your body can give you yes or a no. And then just ask it again 3 times. Is this a yes for me? Do I go on this trip? And I got to tell you, like, this is what I did. I went to the top of the mountain. I was at the ski resort. I was in the woods. It was beautiful. And the yes was so powerful. I felt like I was just being pulled, like somebody had grabbed my shirt and pulled me forward. It was very clear. The challenge for many of us then, it's not a challenge, but this is where faith comes in, is you got to take soul aligned action. So what that means is in that moment where I'm given, it's a yes or it's a no. Sometimes we get the answer we don't want. And I've gotten the answer my brain didn't want. I was like, oh my God, please don't make it be that. Please don't make it be that. But I get it, but then I have to act. So then the next thing is like, okay, I'm in. I have no idea. And I let it go. I let it go. I don't have to figure it all out. I don't have to have all the answers. I just trust. And this is taking the 5D into the 3D. So this is when we take the 5th dimensional work, the energetic spiritual realm, listening to divine guidance, and I pull it into the 3-dimensional by choosing and making a decision. The 4D is the mindset, is the brain work, is I choose now to just trust. I choose to trust. I choose to surrender. Now I get to let my soul lead my brain into what I'm going to think and go with. So I know this was a little bit long, but I actually wanted to take you guys through that practice and that exercise.
Such a good practice.
Because man, it is powerful. It has been life-changing for me, life-changing for both of us, for our clients. And this is how you train yourself to ask yourself better questions where the truth lives. And the more you listen, and the more you give yourself permission to receive, the more you train yourself, the faster you'll be able to access that intuitive guidance, whatever it is, moment to moment. The challenge we all have is just taking faith, because we always think we know better. Our brain is like, yeah, but I know better. I've got years of programming to keep you safe and sound in survival. But the thing is, like, we're not primal anymore. We've evolved. we've evolved into higher consciousness. We have the ability now to engage in the supernatural, control our thoughts and emotions, and act. We can choose our actions. We're not just responsive creatures responding in the wild anymore.
Mm-hmm. It's such a beautiful practice, and it really has been life-changing for not only us, but for those of us that we've worked with to start to teach this. And we were just in Colombia a few weeks ago, and Christine walked us through the exercise of just learning in our bodies, like what that hell yes and what that no hell no feels like. And then the real work, if there is any, comes on the backside of that, where I get to trust into, say, oh, isn't that interesting?
That's the work, guys. The work is having faith.
Yeah.
The work is trusting. It's
Yeah.
not hard work of doing. It's just not doing. It's
And
unlearning all that old programming that tells you, yeah,
right.
but you got to do it this way. That's the unlearning.
Yeah. And, you know, the old program, right, has been hustle and grind, very much 3D, right? You know, move your way through it. And, you know, there's a time and place. There's a time and a place when that's really valuable. You know, sometimes there's yard work to do, and we get to get the rakes out and get the bags out, and we get to go do the work. And there's a certain level of value, and it's great to be able to do that. You just don't have to do that all the time, because maybe you're pressed for time and you got an extra $20 and you're saying, what would another way to do this be? And you know, there's a neighbor kid across the street who can do this for you, right? And that helps you access a greater abundance of time and a greater abundance of bandwidth to be able to go do other things that may be more important to you. So this episode on practicing curiosity is, I think, the 6th one, right, in the series of 10. And really, I think just one of those things is we've gone through all of these things from the beginning, starting with just to stop doing what's not working, right? So let's eliminate some of the stuff that just keeps you spinning on that hamster wheel, to create the white space, to go and get quiet, to do the purge, right? Let's get the old stuff out of the closet, get that stinky fish out of there. Now to create some space and meditate. Now we're prepping the ground. We're creating fertile ground for great ideas and great activity to flow from. Now we're just going to be able to observe and look at use our sense of awareness.
Detach and watch.
Detach, objectively do that. And then finally, now we're talking, okay, and then we talk about practicing curiosity. And so now I'm going to start looking at some ways, you know, so that to actually move past that hustle and grind, past the old program. This is, if there's a hack in this program, I don't think there's really a hack, but if there's something like that, this is it. So thank you for tuning in to this podcast, to all of our podcasts. We really appreciate you giving us time, whether you're listening on Spotify or on iTunes, or you're watching the video on YouTube. By the way, if you did listen to the audio, I'd recommend coming back and watching maybe like the last 15, 20 minutes of this on YouTube, so that you can actually see Christine's body movements while she's talking through and teaching, you know, how to ask those questions and how to get that body response. Because I think that there's some value. I know I was getting it as I was just watching her, sitting next to her do this.
And as he's talking, like, I gotta tell you, I had so many downloads that were happening while I was doing this last 15 minutes that I'm about to share with you when we get off this call. But like, this is the work. Do it with me. Do it with me. Go back and listen to this podcast, listen to the last 15 minutes, and actually do the exercise. We talk about these exercises, but the magic is, like, it's awesome to listen to podcasts, guys. It's awesome to read books. It's awesome to have all these things. But the magic is in the doing, like not the doing, but like it's taking it and implementing it in between. So get a piece of paper, write out the questions that we talked about, and then expand on them. Ask yourself, what else could I ask myself? Do the practice of checking in with your body. Do it daily, recalibrate often. If you put these things into practice, you will see results. If you don't put these things into practice, all you're doing is collecting more information. And that is not the purpose of this podcast.
Yeah. So with everything going on in the world right now, obviously we've had some live events that have been on the calendar and things that are coming up. The real answer is we don't know, you know, when are they going to open the travel back up so that we can go to Colombia. As of right now, we're still planning to go in June. And then if we have to push that back, then we push it back. That's just the reality of the situation. Everybody's playing by those same kind of rules right now. So what I'm noticing though, just this came back out of somebody who was just there. Maybe you've been listening to some of the the interviews that Christine did with the few people that were with us last time. in between some of these other episodes, but somebody had said on the last group that the 4 days that they were in the garden in Colombia was like 20 years of talk therapy. So if you got some shit to work through and you're like, hey, I'm doing these things you guys are telling me to do, and I just want more, reach out to us, whether it's through personal message or through social media, or head over to thegreatunlearningproject.com, or find us in some way, shape, or form, and get in touch with us about some of those upcoming trips. We can get you on the email list that we have, so we make sure that you're getting all the up-to-date information as we know. So right now we're planning to go, I think we leave June 24th, planning through about July 2nd. And it's going to be a great trip. Hopefully we're able to get out of North America into South America. And then again, at the end of October, which from a time frame perspective, hopefully a lot of this will have blown over by then and we should be good to go. So that trip is already half full. So I think it's only like 4 spots left in October right now. So please jump on that and get in touch with us.
And I just want to say, finally, things have pivoted, things are shifting. But Mark and I both coach people through these processes. So if this is something where, and actually as I was doing this, I'm just going to put this out there. I have no idea. We haven't talked about it. This is like totally like, we have coaching. So I do one-on-one coaching. Mark does one-on-one. We have a group coaching program as well. That is our mastermind aligned experience. It's about creating more alignment. So if you go to christineline.com, you can book a discovery session or a strategy session, just a one-off session, just to get a feel and an experience for that. I can support you, or Mark can support you wherever you are right now. You will walk away from that session with actionable things that you can actually like take hold and do. So I really encourage you, like right now you're at home, there's a lot of stuff coming. If you just want to deep dive into you right now and just focus 100% on you, like start there. That's an easy thing to do. And if you go to my homepage, christineline.com, there's right there on the homepage, you can book a one-on-one session or send us a message and you can book with Mark. Secondly, and I'm going to pop off here in a second, but as we're going through these steps, the series is awesome, guys, but what's come through for me, as I was asking a hell yes and a hell no, is like, you get to do a 10-week coaching series on just these 10 steps. So what I'm going to do is talk to Mark about how we can put together a 10-week program where we're actually going to live coach people through just these 10 processes for 10 weeks. So we have the trainings we've already done. It's great to listen to the podcast, but having it like laser coached and stuff is key. So I'm going to figure that out, what that looks like. So stay tuned for that. But I think a great pivot right now is helping people to go through this process. And we'll launch a mini course, 10 weeks, to just help support you guys to go through this, talk about it, coach it, and we'll do it in a group format. So it's accessible for people. Yeah.
All right. I love it.
All right.
We'll do it. Stay tuned. Thank you guys. Appreciate you tuning in.
Bye. Yes. Okay. Now we get to